Hello there. Welcome back to another episode of Migraine Relief Hotline. I'm Kelli, the migraine dietitian, and each week I'll be answering your biggest questions about migraine so you can feel more confident and in control. Now, I am still a little bit sick, so I will try to keep my voice smooth and as non-nasally as possible, but no promises, okay? So bear with me. And actually, speaking of being sick, I know a lot of you are sick right now or getting over some sort of yucky bug. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of my favorite tips and tricks before we get into today's question that I like to use when I'm sick. So the first one is tea, which I know isn't revolutionary, but it's the type of tea. So there's two that I like. Throat coat is one I've talked about already on the show. Another one that's been saving my butt is nettle tea or stinging nettle tea. So traditional medicinals makes a great stinging nettle tea. The reason we love this when we're sick, especially when we're dealing with like sinus stuff, is because it has antihistamine properties, which is pretty cool. So make a nice hot cup while it's steeping, which usually takes about 10 minutes. Breathe in the steam, right? And then drink it up when it's done steeping, and it can help reduce histamine levels in the body. Now, make sure this is going to be appropriate for you. If you have certain allergies, seasonal allergies, environmental allergies, may not be the best fit, but for most people, it can be a really nice tool. My other favorite, because when I get sick, it tends to be sinusy, right? And I know a lot of y'all deal with the same thing. I love a good sinus massage, okay? So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can look up videos on YouTube, but you can also just do what feels good. So find where the pressure is. If you're watching, you can see what I'm doing, but just find where the pressure is in your sinus area. So your sinuses are mainly like kind of under your eyes almost and to the sides of your nose. And I think you can kind of feel where that pressure is, but they also are kind of up above your eyebrows a little bit too. But just massage outwards. Use firm pressure, but don't hurt yourself. You can even go up, to your eye bone, right? Your brow bone. Just massage, right? You can even get like a washcloth and run it under some hot water. Don't burn yourself. You can use it as a compress over your sinuses and then do the massage. Honestly, it's a lifesaver when you're dealing with pressure. Now, let me know if you want me to do a whole episode on this because I absolutely can. But let's go ahead and get into today's question. A quick note before we get started. I am a dietitian, but I am not your dietitian. All of the information in this episode is intended as educational only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Make sure to check with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. All right, so today's question is from Sarah. Thank you for writing in, Sarah. And y'all are going to love this question today. How do I know if my migraine attacks are hormonal? So many of you deal with hormonal migraine or menstrual migraine, so we're going to get into that today to figure out how you can be sure that that's what you're dealing with. Now, hormonal migraine is a super common type of migraine, but before we get more into it, I want to make sure that we all understand what it means to have hormonal migraine, because this is actually a subtype of migraine, right? So if you have, typical migraine that comes with head pain, you can have hormonal migraine as a subtype. So you still have, classic or common migraine, but you experience hormonal migraine attacks. Same thing with vestibular migraine. Your type of migraine is vestibular, and then you experience hormonal migraine attacks. That's your subtype or a subtype. So I know it can get a little bit confusing, but hormonal migraine is not the type of migraine you have. It's going to be, honestly, more like a fancy way to say that hormones trigger your migraine attacks, right? That's really what it means. But it can look differently for different people. And when you have hormonal migraine, you can still be triggered by other stuff. So you may experience attacks at certain times during your cycle, but you may also be affected by storms or by bright lights or by skipping meals, right? So it's not just hormones that impact you, but they do impact you. Now, this is one of the most common questions I get, honestly, because hormones affect many areas of migraine, but most people don't know for sure if that's really what's happening. Now, a big misconception about hormonal migraine is that we just need to focus on the hormones. And in particular, we just need to focus on estrogen. But that is not the case. Estrogen matters, but so does progesterone, and so does blood sugar, and so does gut health and detoxification. This all plays a role in your hormonal migraine. So we want to be careful not to get too zoomed in on estrogen or sex hormones. So yes, we want to ask, are my hormones affecting migraine? But we also want to ask, how is my body affecting my hormones? But let's back up and let's talk about ways that you can see if your migraine attacks are hormone related. Now, with hormonal migraine attacks, we're looking for patterns. And with classic hormonal migraine, we're looking for cyclical patterns. So typically, your attacks are going to happen at the same time during your cycle, every cycle, or at least for most cycles. So for most people with hormonal migraine, this is going to be around ovulation, which is at the midpoint of your cycle typically. So if you have a 28-day cycle, ovulation is going to be around day 14. And then a lot of people also experience, or predominantly experience, hormonal migraine attacks during that time right before your period starts. So that premenstrual phase or the luteal phase of your cycle, that's when most people tend to experience hormonal migraine attacks. Now, some people will also experience them during their period, which is not too uncommon. And then some people will experience them after their period, which we're going to talk about later. Now, there are some other things that you can look out for that will help you figure out if your attacks are hormonal. And this is especially helpful if you do have non-hormonal migraine attacks too. It can get a little bit foggy, right? So you're also wanting to look for hormone-related symptoms outside of migraine attacks. So this could be PMS, right? Those are classic signs that your body is reacting sensitively to your menstrual cycle changes, or that you have a hormone imbalance as well. So mood swings, difficult periods, painful periods, cramps, backaches, irregular periods, really short periods, really long periods. These are all red flags that maybe hormones are playing a role in some way. So to recap this, you want to look for cyclical patterns that your cycle, your menstrual cycle, is affecting your migraine attacks. So keep track of your attacks and keep track of your cycle and look at those things together. And that's going to give you a good clue. Now, you want to do this for several months. Okay, so this is where we're going to want to track consistently so that you can really see those patterns. Because just like we talked about last week with one event doesn't equal a trigger, same thing with this. Getting an attack during that premenstrual phase once does not equal hormonal migraine, right? But when it becomes a pattern, when it happens for 3, 4, 5, 6 months in a row, that's a pattern. That's likely a hormonal migraine. So we want to do some consistent tracking. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about what to do if you have hormonal migraine attacks and you're really struggling to address them, because these are typically the trickiest type of attack and the most resistant to treatment. So here are some things that you can think about if this is resonating, because you know the drill. If you've ever talked with your doctor about hormonal migraine and concerns about this, you've probably been given birth control as like one of your only options, if not the only option. And that's the right answer for some people, but it's not the right answer for everyone. So if you are someone with hormonal migraine, especially if you're not using hormonal birth control, we want to think about hormone support on a body-wide level. So this is how we can do that. The first thing we want to think about is metabolism, and more particularly blood sugar, our old friend blood sugar balance. This is because estrogen plays a role in blood sugar balance and how our body processes carbohydrates and sugar. So blood sugar instability can also play a role and kind of fit into your susceptibility to hormonal migraine attacks. Now, if you tend to get like dizzy, irritable, shaky, hangry between meals, even if it's only been like 2 or 3 hours, this is something to start thinking about. Next is liver health and detoxification as a whole. Now, we're not talking about detox in like the trendy juicing way. We're talking about detox like your body processing and eliminating waste and supporting that process. Detoxing is an important part of making sure that estrogen doesn't build up in your body, which can lead to estrogen dominance. So I'm actually going to do a little bit of a deep dive on this right now so you can come away with some tips for how to support this area in particular, because it's really overlooked. Now, a lot of our detox, especially for estrogen, starts in the liver. And this is happening in 2 phases. Now, phase 1, which involves cytochrome P450 enzymes, if you want to know that much detail, you do not have to remember that. This is what converts estrogen into its intermediate form. So this is starting to break down estrogen into forms that your body can eliminate more easily. Next, we've got phase 2, which is methylation and glucuronidation. Super fun words. Again, you do not need to remember those. But this is when your body packages those estrogen metabolites for elimination. And the way that you do this is through urine, yes, so you do pee out a lot of, excess estrogen, but we also get rid of estrogen through bile. So the liver sends that bile to the gallbladder sends it to your intestines, and then you poop it out. So those are the 2 main pathways for estrogen detox. And those are the pathways that we want to support, because if your liver isn't effectively detoxing, or any of those pieces along the way, the gallbladder, your intestines, your kidneys, you're going to have issues. We want to support all those different areas to make sure that estrogen isn't building up, leading to high estrogen dominance, which in my experience is a big issue for people with hormonal migraine, because not only are you going to have more dramatic estrogen withdrawal, which is when our estrogen drops during our cycle, which can be a big trigger for some people, but you're also going to experience other issues associated with high estrogen, like worsened PMS, worse periods, horrible cramping, mood swings, sleep issues. We don't want any of that. So this matters even outside of just hormonal migraine. So some simple things that you can do, because I know this is feeling like a lot. Pee when you need to pee. Don't hold your pee. This is not good for a lot of different reasons, but one is that pee is a detox pathway. We need to get rid of it. So pee when you need to pee. Don't hold it for hours and hours. Same thing with everything else, right? Go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom, just in general. And then you can also add more cruciferous veggies to your diet. So cruciferous veggies contain something called sulforaphane, and sulforaphane supports that estrogen detox pathway in the liver. So that's a super simple way that you can help with this process. Cruciferous veggies are going to be things like broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli sprouts. And yes, there are, supplements, sulforaphane supplements, but you can add some of these foods to your diet and it's going to have a similar effect. Now, you also want to make sure that you're adding fiber to your diet, about 30 grams a day, because this is part of how your body poops out estrogen via bile instead of reabsorbing it. Your body likes to recycle things, so if there isn't a lot of fiber to grab onto the bile in your intestines, which contains estrogen you're getting rid of, sometimes your body can recycle it, which we don't necessarily want. This is also good for cholesterol and other things, so add more fiber to your diet. And then if this is something you really struggle with, hormone balance and hormone imbalances is a big topic. There are so many things that impact this. Detox is just one area, but we're also wanting to think about stress hormones, thyroid, the nervous system, gut imbalances like microbiome imbalances, issues with digestion, nutrient deficiencies. The reason why I'm listing all of this out is not to overwhelm you, but to help you see that there are so many opportunities for you to feel better and so many routes you can go down to improve your hormonal migraine. You are not stuck. You are not at a dead end. There are more things we can explore, okay? And I gave you some places to start with detox because This is one of the most overlooked areas, so hopefully this helps get you started. So let's wrap it all up. If migraine attacks follow a cyclical pattern, hormones are likely playing a role, but not just estrogen, right? We want to zoom out. Start tracking if you're not sure. So track your cycle, your menstrual cycle, and track migraine. Mash those up over a few months and see if you're noticing any patterns. Now, if you remember, I had a little asterisk earlier about attacks that happen at the end or right after your period. So if that's you, if you start tracking and you notice that pattern, it can still be hormones. It can also be iron, because after your period, you're going to have a little bit less iron than you normally would, because menstrual blood contains iron, of course. Now, if you have a heavier period, this is going to be multiplied, right? Because we're losing more blood, more iron during our menstrual cycle. So if this is a common pattern you see, especially if you also deal with major fatigue, lightheadedness, pale mucous membranes like your gums, you might be low in iron, so it's not a bad idea to get your iron and your ferritin checked next time you're at the doctor. And remember, if you're tired of dealing with this yourself, piecing it together yourself, this is the kind of thing that we cover in Raise Your Threshold. So please reach out if you need support with this. There is a spot available for you. You know, you can always DM me on Instagram at the.migraine.dietitian if you just want to chat this over and see if it might be a good fit for you, or there's the link in the show notes if you just like to learn more on your own. And that is it for this week, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Migraine Relief Hotline. I truly hope that you found it helpful. Make sure if you did find it helpful, or if you think it might be helpful for someone you know, send it their way. And if you did enjoy this episode, please do me a favor and leave a review, a rating. Make sure you're following the podcast, because all of those things help other people find the show. If you have a question that you'd like me to cover on my next podcast episode, you can submit that using the form linked in the show notes. And if you'd like to join the Patreon to further support the show, that link is also in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye.